The Forgotten Mansion by the Lake. When I first saw the mansion, it looked like something out of a Gothic postcard. Perched by the edge of Crystal Lake, covered in vines, windows shattered like broken promises. Locals said the house had been empty for decades, cursed even. But I didn't believe in curses. I believed in restoration. After 15 years as an architect in the city, I was tired of glass towers and concrete boxes. I wanted something real, something with history. When I found the Lake Mansion listed at a ridiculous price through a tax sale, I thought I'd hit gold. The house was technically outside the main town limits, but it sat on a patch of land, once included in the Lakeside Estates HOA. That should have been my first red flag. The HOA had dissolved 10 years ago after mismanagement and lawsuits, or so I was told. I signed the papers, packed up my truck, and drove the 3 hours to my new project. Chapter 2. Whispers of the HOA. When I arrived, the lake shimmered under the early summer sun. The mansion stood silent and proud. Even in decay, ivy climbed the stone walls, birds nested in the eaves, and the wrought iron gate hung crooked. It was perfect. A few curious locals stopped by when they saw my truck. One of them, an old man named Cliff, leaned on his cane and said, "You're fixing that place up. You know it used to belong to the HOA president himself, old Harold Denman. Nasty piece of work." I chuckled. Guess I'll have to exorcise the ghosts of bad leadership. Cliff's eyes narrowed. "Careful, son. That HOA might be dead on paper, but there's still folks around who act like they run this lake." I brushed it off as local superstition. I'd dealt with enough entitled committees in my life to know how to handle people with fake authority. Or so I thought. Chapter 3. The First Warning. 3 weeks later, renovation was in full swing. My crew and I had cleared debris, installed temporary power, and started stabilizing the foundation. Then one morning, a white SUV with a blue logo rolled up. The logo read, Crystal Lake Neighborhood Association, Property Management Division. A woman in a pastel suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. I'm Susan Fairchild, Community Compliance Officer. You can't perform construction here without HOA approval." I raised an eyebrow. HOA approval? There is no HOA. The records show it dissolved. She smiled the kind of smile that hides a threat. "The association was recently reactivated by a board of residents. You're in violation of architectural standards and property maintenance codes." I laughed. "Lady, I own this place. It's outside your jurisdiction." Susan didn't flinch. She handed me a yellow notice. "Failure to comply may result in fines or removal of unauthorized structures." Then she drove off, like she'd just delivered a death sentence. I stared at the paper. It listed fines of $250 per day. Ridiculous. I tore it up and got back to work. Chapter 4. Escalation. A week later, the harassment began. First, my construction dumpster disappeared overnight. Then the portable toilet was found tipped over. My crew started getting notes left on their vehicles. "Stop illegal construction." Signed only as HOA enforcement. When I called the county office, the clerk sighed like she'd heard this story before. "Those people again. Technically, they don't have authority over that parcel, but they've been pushing boundaries for years. Document everything and don't engage." So I installed security cameras. That same night, the cameras caught a group of 3 people walking around the site, shining flashlights through the windows, taking photos. I recognized one of them, Susan. Chapter 5. The Cease and Desist. 2 days later, I received a letter, certified mail. It claimed that the Crystal Lake HOA had voted unanimously to seize my property for violating community development codes. Attached was a cease and desist order, printed on fancy letterhead with a fake seal. I laughed at first, but something about it chilled me. They were organized. Too organized. I took the letter to my lawyer, Ethan Vance. An old college friend. He scanned it and frowned. These idiots are bluffing, but it's a dangerous bluff. They're acting like a government entity, which is fraud. I'll send a formal response. He did. A strong one, and for a while, things went quiet. Chapter 6. The Return. I had to leave town for 2 weeks to handle a contract in Chicago. I locked the property, secured the tools, and informed the sheriff's office to keep an eye out. When I returned, I saw smoke, rising over the tree line. My stomach dropped. I fought the truck down the gravel road, tires spitting dirt. When I turned the final bend, I froze. Half the mansion was gone. Bulldozers stood idle in the yard, and a group of workers in neon vests were packing up. The once grand facade was a pile of broken stone. I jumped out of the truck, heart pounding. What the hell happened here? A man in a hard hat walked up casually. Demolition order, sir. HOA directive. I grabbed the paper he showed me. The same forged letterhead as before. Who authorized this? He shrugged. Our boss said the property was condemned. HOA hired us. You'll have to talk to them. I nearly blacked out from rage. Chapter 7. The sheriff's arrival. I called 911, shouting into the phone. Within 30 minutes, Sheriff Marlene Davis pulled up in her cruiser. She walked around the wreckage, shaking her head. They really did it this time, she muttered. You knew about them? I snapped. We've had complaints for years, but without proof of criminal intent, it's all civil. Until now. She took photos, collected the fake demolition order, and said, I'll file charges for property destruction, but this'll take time. They're slippery. I looked at the mansion, my dream project, reduced to rubble, and something inside me hardened. This wasn't over. Chapter 8. A dark discovery. As I sifted through the debris that evening, I found something strange. A series of old files in a waterproof box under the main staircase remains. Inside were HOA documents from the 1980s, meeting minutes, fines, and a ledger. The last entry chilled me. Transfer of remaining HOA assets to private trust. H. Denman, S. Fairchild. Susan. She wasn't just a compliance officer. She was the daughter of the original HOA president, and she'd been using the same playbook her father did. Bullying property owners, seizing land, and laundering assets through fake community funds. I realized then that my mansion wasn't their target. The lakefront land was. Chapter 9. A plan for payback. I called Ethan. They destroyed my property. I want blood. Legally. He replied calmly. Then we go federal. Mail fraud, impersonation, racketeering, all of it. But we'll need evidence. I looked at the files in my hands and smiled grimly. Oh, I've got evidence. As the sun set behind the ruined mansion, the lake reflected the fiery orange sky. And in that reflection, I saw my resolve. They thought they'd demolished my dream, but they'd just built the foundation for their downfall. Building the case, the next morning I was standing in what used to be my front yard, surrounded by the wreckage of a mansion and the ghosts of bad intentions. Susan Fairchild and her reactivated HOA had done more than destroy a building. They'd challenged the wrong person. My lawyer, Ethan, arrived mid-morning with a folder full of documents. He looked around, whistling softly. They didn't just overstep. They committed felony destruction, impersonation, and fraud. If we play this right, we can bury them in court. We gathered every piece of evidence. The fake demolition order, the security footage, and most importantly, the old HOA records I'd found buried in the ruins. Those records were a goldmine. Decades of shady property transfers, unexplained maintenance fees, and even a list of shell companies tied to the Fairchild family. Ethan tapped the ledger. This connects them to land scams dating back to the 80s. We can build a racketeering case. But first, we needed to make noise. Chapter 11. Going Publix. I called up a friend from college, Rachel Torres, now an investigative reporter for the State News Network. When she arrived, she took one look at the rubble and said, "You weren't kidding. Who the hell demolishes private property in 2025 without permits?" I handed her the files. People who think they're untouchable. By that weekend, Rachel's story aired. HOA gone wild. Local association demolishes private mansion without permit. The footage of the wrecked house went viral. Commenters raged online. HOAs are out of control. This is theft disguised as management. Sue them into the lake. And suddenly, the Crystal Lake HOA was in the spotlight. The kind of spotlight that melts lies. Chapter 12. The HOA cracks. Susan tried to fight back. She called a press conference outside the gated entrance to Lakeside Estates, wearing her perfect pink blazer and that same fake smile. "We were only enforcing community standards for safety and beautification," she said into the cameras. The structure was condemned. "We acted responsibly." That's when Rachel aired the county statement live. No condemnation order was ever issued. The HOA acted illegally. The color drained from Susan's face. Overnight, 3 board members resigned. 2 others claimed Susan forged their signatures on the demolition request. Then a bigger bomb dropped. The state attorney's office launched a criminal investigation into the HOA's finances. Chapter 13. The Hidden Deeds. As the investigation deepened, I spent nights going through the old ledgers and documents. That's when I found something buried between the pages. A handwritten addendum labeled Private Transfer Agreement. It listed over 12 lakefront lots, signed over from homeowners who had defaulted on dues. But the payments, they went directly into a private trust named Denman Fairchild Holdings. That trust now owned several prime parcels of Crystal Lake, including the land where my mansion once stood. But here's the twist. That trust had expired legally 10 years ago due to inactivity. The land rights had reverted to the State Land Authority, not the HOA, meaning my mansion stood on public land that the HOA had been illegally claiming all along. Ethan grinned when I told him. Perfect. We're not just fighting a property case now. We're about to expose a full-blown land fraud scheme. Chapter 14. The Courtroom Showdown. The trial took months to prepare, but when it began, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, angry residents, and curious locals filled the seats. I sat behind Ethan, while Susan and her legal team strutted in like peacocks. The judge, an older man with a deep voice, called the case. State of Illinois versus Crystal Lake Neighborhood Association. Ethan began with a statement that silenced the room. This isn't about paint colors or fences. This is about power and how one family turned a community association into a criminal enterprise. He laid out the forged demolition orders, fake corporate filings, and proof of money laundering through HOA improvement projects. Then he showed the before and after drone footage of my property, the mansion standing proud, then reduced to rubble. When Susan took the stand, her mask cracked. "I was following orders," she stammered. "From who?" Ethan asked. From the board whose signatures you forged." The courtroom gasped. Susan's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. By the end of the trial, the jury didn't take long. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, property destruction, impersonation of a public entity, and racketeering. Chapter 15. Justice and Rebuild. 2 weeks later, I received official word. The court had ordered full restitution for damages, plus punitive compensation from the HOA's frozen assets. Over $2.4 million. I used a portion of that to rebuild the mansion, this time stronger, smarter, and with cameras on every corner. When the construction finished 6 months later, the new Lakeview restoration project became a local landmark. The same people who once avoided the cursed mansion now came to admire it. Cliff, the old man who'd warned me at the start, stopped by one evening. "Guess the curse broke after all, huh?" I smiled. No curses, just consequences. Chapter 16. The final twist. A month after the trial, I received a letter, unsigned, slipped under my gate. It read, "You may have won against Susan, but there are others. The lake still belongs to us." Attached was a photocopy of an old survey map showing underground tunnels running beneath the lake and into neighboring properties. One tunnel led directly under my land. I had it inspected, and what we found made my blood run cold. Sealed barrels, decades old, stamped with the logo of Denman Construction, Harold Denman's company. Inside, old chemical waste. The original HOA hadn't just been corrupt. They'd been hiding an illegal dumping operation under the lake for years. And now it was my land, my responsibility, sitting on top of their buried crimes. Chapter 17. Cleaning the lake. Instead of rage, I felt clarity. The real victory wouldn't be in lawsuits. It would be in redemption. I partnered with the state's environmental agency, donated part of my settlement, and launched the Crystal Lake Cleanup Initiative. The media picked it up again. From demolition to restoration, homeowner turns HOA scandal into environmental triumph. The same lake once ruled by greed was now being restored to its natural beauty. Fishermen returned. Birds nested again. The old mansion, reborn, stood as a symbol not of loss, but of renewal. Chapter 18. Full circle. One foggy morning, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the water, I thought about everything that had happened. Susan was serving time. The old HOA was dissolved permanently. And me, I'd turned their arrogance into my purpose. Ethan called to tell me the state had officially transferred full ownership of the lakefront to my company as compensation and stewardship. Responsibility. I looked out over the calm water and said quietly, "Welcome back, Crystal Lake." A heron flew low across the surface, scattering ripples like silver threads. And just like that, the lake and the mansion were alive again. Epilogue. The new HOA 1 year later. A new sign appeared at the mansion gates. Crystal Lake Community. Restored and protected. But beneath it, in smaller print, was a message I personally added. No HOA ever again.